It's a very nice talk, where he says plenty of good things, and where he thanks God for that there was no deal with Rome, and that the benedictions is as bad as Pope Francis. Things we've never heard from his mouth in recent times. But we need to keep our eyes open, because the main issue remains. That is, Bishop Fellay maintains his April 15th declaration. Now, the April 15th declaration is a piece of modernism. And he maintains the same reasoning process, which is flawed. That is, if I state the principle of tradition at the head of a document, then I can trample tradition underfoot, basically, practically, in the last paragraphs of the document, which is modernist mush. That is, if you posit tradition at the beginning of a text, then necessarily you're going to refuse a new Mass, you're going to refuse a new code, you're going to refuse Vatican II and the new sacraments and the new profession of faith. So as long as this text is still defended by the society, you have a major doctrinal problem. And then many priests in the society think that it is a good text. Father Thiemann is a teacher in a seminary, and he thinks that it is a good text, when this text is the epitome of modernism. So, a dogma teacher who doesn't see the modernism into this text. So we have to stay where we are, because I think he's been forced to do what he is doing because Pope Francis is the worst. So even in the eyes of Calvin and Luther, Pope Francis is really, really bad. Now it took him 7 months to realize it, but in the eyes of people who are not even Catholic, this Pope is the pits. I've got one faithful in Long Island. She told me that in her office, that the one who was working next desk, she was a Protestant. She wanted to convert to Catholicism, and then she told her, "I'm not converting to Catholicism because of your Pope over there." So he's a horrible Pope, and so it's impossible in these conditions. It's impalatable. It's unpopular that a deal should be signed with the New Rome in these conditions, even by Bishop Fellay. So that's why there is a backpedaling taking place there. So that's the one aspect which is frightening in his conference, was this. And the other thing is the surprising quote that he gives, that we can put to the repertoires of the great famous statements of Bishop Fellay, is when he says, "But we dare to say that there are good things in Vatican II." And this is what is poisoning the mind of many priests, because many priests of the society, when you talk to them now, they tell you, "But so what? There are good things in Vatican II." Now, Archbishop Fellay made this triple distinction: good things, ambiguous things, bad things in Vatican II. But he also said simultaneously that to claim that we can clean up Vatican II by separating these 3 items is an illusion. Those 3 things are entangled within one thing, which is Vatican II. When you make a cocktail, once a cocktail is made, it's too late. You cannot, tell the bartender, "Can you please separate, the gin from the tonic and the soda? Can you separate the gin, the lemon, and the soda for me?" The bartender is going to tell you, "You're mad. You asked for a gin tonic, here it is, and get out." So with Vatican II, you cannot separate these 3 ingredients. They are meshed together. Not only that, but we must remember that our attitude was the attitude of Dickens, famous quote of Dickens, who says, "The truth, when used in order to serve error, when a true statement, when it is used in order to help error, is worse than error in its natural state." Even the truth is worse than error when it is used to give error the penetration that it wouldn't have if error was taught alone. For instance, the document of Bishop Fellay wouldn't be that bad if he simply said we recognize a new mass, a new code, and the Vatican II, the new profession of faith, new sacraments, and all that. It wouldn't be so bad. It would be pure error in its natural state. But the document is much worse because he mixes tradition with error. That's the worst. And so that's one of the quotes in this Kansas City conference that is very worrying. The other thing that he says, the Pope is really bad, but they are still the church. Well, Bishop Fellay always said they are the conciliar church. They are occupying positions of the church, but they are not the church. They don't have the four marks. Bishop Fellay went so far as to say that they don't have the four marks of the Catholic Church. Why? Because they have a new faith. You could take the definition of Saint Robert Bellarmine, that the Catholic Church is a reunion of the faithful united by the same Catholic faith, partaking in the same sacraments, under the same head, which is the Roman Pontiff. We take this definition of Saint Robert Bellarmine of the Catholic Church and have a parallel definition for the conciliar church. The conciliar church is the assembly of the people of God, or those who call the people of God, and who profess the same modernist faith and receive the same adulterated sacraments, and they are all under the same modernist and heretical hierarchy, which is the one who occupies the see in Rome right now. So we have to deal with another church. It's another church. It is not the Catholic Church. Now, this is also one thing which had been very debated during this entire year in this crisis, is that they don't want anymore to call them the conciliar church, and that they are a separate church. That some people go to heaven from that church out of invincible ignorance. We still admit that. But they are not saved by that conciliar church. And the fact that they occupy the positions of authority doesn't make them the church, the Catholic Church. Just like Caiaphas was occupying the position of authority. But that synagogue is dead. So we have a similar situation. And so we cannot, because if we call them the church, then of course, then we must look for recognition from them. Or we can work with them to some extent. Or we can have the illusion that we can collaborate with them if we have those so-called guarantees. And so that's also something which is still present in the thought of Bishop Fellay as we speak. Or 2 weeks ago. Maybe he has changed his mind on this. On other issues where it was sounding very much like Bishop Wilson. And sounding very much like a great devotee of Our Lady of Fatima and so on and so forth, And but there is no major change on the major problem. But the time may come when they're going to come back to us and say, "Hey, look, the deal is completely off, and Bishop Fellay isn't even capable to do what has to be done with the April 15 declaration, which is to retract it. That is, to isolate the errors in the text and detest them. If that is to be done, would we be reconciled? Would we lay down our weapons? I would say it would be one of the first 4 conditions, a part of the first 4 conditions for us to lay down our weapons. Because there is still a big problem, is that the ship is still sinking by its liberalism. So there is a need of a cleanup of the errors, the doctrinal errors of Bishop Fellay and his staff. And these errors have to be retracted. The general chapter of 2012, with these 6 conditions and everything, that has to be rescinded. Can they do that? It's very unlikely that they can do that. And is Bishop Fellay going to go back on each of his erroneous quotes and says, Vatican II is a super heresy. I was wrong to say it was not a super heresy. Or we cannot say that Vatican II is 95% good. Is he going to go back and retract these errors like St. Augustine did? Very unlikely. And then the other thing that they need to do is they need to clean up all the channels of information, digi.org, SSPS.org. They need to clean up the school programs. They need to clean up the seminary training now is worrying. Those things need to be cleaned up. The organs of teaching. There has to be a reform there. And then the third thing that has to be done is they need to clean house. That is to remove and to reform the general chapter, the 40 members of the general chapter, into a fully anti-liberal college of priests. That is, they have to remove Father Rostand, they have to remove Father Troidet, and the others who are liberals. Because even if Bishop Fellay were to resign, he will be replaced by a liberal. Yes?
Well, if Bishop Fellay's remarks were sincere, wouldn't he just do that?
Well, that's what I say. If he were, for me, that would be the proof of his sincerity. Because you can give good words. Words are inexpensive. But a conversion is a change of action. So he will have to clean house. He will have to clean the mess. Because otherwise we don't have the guarantee. And also the first condition that is the liberalism which is taking place throughout the society, like the contraceptive mentality which is spreading. That takes a lot of work to be removed. They don't want to address that problem, but that's a huge order, you know. And they have to place the good priest back into power, like Father Peter Scott. All those who were sidelined have to be placed back into power.
Well, assuming that he was not sincere, what was the purpose of the remarks, do you think?
Well, it's damage control. It's clearly impossible to have a deal with Pope Francis now, because even the Ecclesiastical people are up in arms. So he's got no choice than to speak that way about Pope Francis. He's quite late, you know, in the train. But well, if he does it, I mean, fine. I mean, if more people bash, you know, the Modernism of Pope Francis, you know, I rejoice in that. So we must have the spirit of Centauri. If others than us do it out of jealousy or, you know, competition with us, as long as they tell the truth, then we can rejoice on that. But my point is that the body of the SSPX is covered now with ulcers of liberalism. Like your local priest here was asked about the difference between SSPX and the Fraternity of St. Peter, and he couldn't tell the difference. So that's a sign. And all the other signs of liberalism, what you see, you know, spreading everywhere, the curriculum in Australia, the school in Australia, the liberal ideas, the fact that there is a clear slide at the local level as well. So I think it's more a service to the church that we do if we prepare this lifeboat. Even if it means that we sacrifice all what we have built for 4 years. In fact, what we have built for 4 years was to prepare us for this hour, so that there would be a decent remnant in this crisis. Because, you know, a very telling sign is in France, Father Lameran. Father Lameran is a prior in Lille, and he's always viewed as an ideal, very charitable prior. He's very comparable to Father Vassal. That is, he's a very charitable priest with a great zeal for souls, running after sinners, running after the weaker ones in the parish. And he was very appreciated by his faithful whenever he was. But all of a sudden, he announced to the faithful, "That's it, my dear faithful, I am leaving the SSPX. I'm asking for some rest and everything. And then he tells them after Mass that he is rejoining the diocese. He's not even going to... but that's a sign that the liberal ideas have penetrated. They have trickled down the hierarchy. That is, Bishop Fellay has set the course of the train, of a big ship. Now, really be capable to turn around the ship again, that's pretty hard. Now, we wish him the best. If he does it, then we will recognize that he has turned the ship around. If he does these four things, if the ship actually turns around, and the liberal priests are demoted from their position of authority, if those things actually happen, I won't deny them. Just like today, I'm not denying it that he's calling Pope Francis a modernist. I'm not denying it. That's what is obvious. It's an obvious statement, but it's a true statement coming from his mouth. But he's got plenty more to do. Because we are not safe. The society of St. President is compromised right now. It is sinking. Because as a priest, the liberalism is still spreading. And also, since they wasted their time on this love affair with the New Rome for so many years, they forgot that liberalism was creeping from other angles, through in our youth, in our schools, in our seminarians, and in the rank and file of the priests. So that in many places now you have this new form of the priest, which is 1950 form of priesthood, which is an emasculated priesthood, which is missing the militant side of the priesthood, which is missing this aspect that our Lord had, which is the rejection of evil. Because our religion is about this as well. It's not that I base everything on the negativity, but the negativity has to be there. Otherwise we perish. And so, the liberals are, they have qualities. I don't deny that. But there is that thing which is missing and which is putting the life of the souls in danger. And so this has to be corrected. Now, being a superior general of the society and with all the power that he has, he's got the power to do these changes. But it would be hard, because he will have to contradict himself. So he will have to make people understand that he was wrong, and that takes superhuman humility. It's very hard. It's not the way it happens usually, especially because he has a conception of authority in which authority cannot lose the face. He said that in a conference in France, in Lille, actually, the prior of Father Lamran. He said, we must understand that the Novus Ordo, they cannot change their position overnight because they cannot lose the face. We cannot ask them to change, all over. And then he had an interview in March of this year, at Nouvelle de France, or February, where he said we cannot ask them to banish the Novus Ordo Mass. They will have to do changes in the Novus Ordo Mass to make it better. And the same thing for Vatican II. So these interviews are fairly recent. I'm not sure if he thinks that way still now. But probably has been a change in his mind. But there is so much to do, and especially, it's not his words that count. Like the key problem in Novus Ordo Church is the appointment of rotten Novus Ordo bishops everywhere in the world. And it's at the hand of these bishops and these local priests that souls are missing their salvation. And so there has to be a reform. A reform, and it has to affect the priests themselves and the superiors themselves. But the last I know, Father Peter Scott goes to the baboons of Zimbabwe. Last I know, the priests who are considered anti-liberals are sidelined, or they don't dare to speak. And there has been no cleanup in the channels of information. So unless we see that, then the ship is too compromised right now. So we have to do what we have to do. But we wish them the best. If they can get their acts together, if you can get a jolt from the apostasy, I mean the horrible things taking place in the New Rome, they could at least inform the faithful of what's going on in Rome. But the Angelus magazine is not giving those facts. But they have to tell the faithful how bad it is out there. That the Novus Ordo of 2013 is much more severely heretical than the Novus Ordo of the 1970s. It's gone way beyond. When the Pope himself says, if somebody is a gay, who am I to judge? And when it's common knowledge that 40% of the cardinals are gays, when the head of the French Episcopal Conference attends Masonic reunions, when they are openly supporting Freemasonry. So the situation has festered much more than before. So well, that's why I guess we have to do what we have to do. There's no and God is blessing us with vocations, surprisingly. And I count 20 vocations to the priesthood this year. 20. Father Joe has 7. I've got 3 or 4. Father Valens got 2 or 3. Father Pancras has got 1, and Father Cardoso has got 4 in Brazil. And then you have those who train for the priesthood in the monasteries. So that brings a tally of 20 young men training for the priesthood. So it's not such a bad start. It's not so bad. It represents, half of the entries in society this year. But we are overstretched. I mean, it's going to be tough to train them. Any questions? Now the other thing, yes?
Father, didn't the Archbishop used to say that the Pope is actually head of 2 churches?
Yes. Yeah. Those are the quotes of the 1970s. I got nothing to do with that church. That church is at once schismatic. At once. It's a new church. It's a new religion. I say that very often. Now the other thing you can be informed about is that there is a Father Pinault's trial going on. That's also a worrying sign. Father Pinault did nothing illegal. He stood against the deal last year because to have a deal with Rome was illegal. It was a contradiction with the legality of the General Chapter of 2006. So why don't they say that he is innocent and then let him go back to his priory? Because Father Pinault stood against the deal, and that's all he did. But they can't do that. Also, we have got the publication of the questionnaire, the questions that Father Salnav had to answer, Father Vuillou, and in this thing it's pure Stalinism. That is, he has to admit his guilt in front of the tribunal, and he also has to denounce other people, lay people, priests, religious, and he has to expose and denounce them and attack them in the course of his trial, something which is completely irregular. So, in a trial, the judge says, I've got this witness, what do you have to say against this witness? But the judge never asks the one who is the accused, please accuse yourself. That's what you call a show trial? Show trial. That's a show trial. That's completely irregular. And also what's worrying in the society is that it's the use of the new code of canon law. Something that has to change. Are they using, did they backpedal on this? No. Because on the decrees of expulsion of Father Ortiz and Father Valad, it's the new code they are using. And they put it in front of the old code. So that's a dramatic change. And that's an ongoing situation. So the words of Bishop Fellay, when they are nice, I won't deny they are nice, but I always agree with the right side of the tongue of the forked tongue of Bishop Fellay. So I am in agreement with this, or I am in agreement with some past beautiful sermons of Bishop Fellay. Like the sermon of my own ordination was a nice sermon, if I remember well. That I agree with. But as long as there is, a split, as long as you see actions or other words contradicting this nice discourse, you are still into trouble because you are dealing with a split tongue. And then we know this is precisely what has damaged the church over the course of 2 liberal centuries. Because that's the modern disease. That you're going to say you are traditional, you're going to say you're going to stick to the truth of the Catholic Church, but 1 minute later you're going to do the opposite, either in your behavior or in your statements. And that cannot be. It has to be one. There has to be this coherence. Now, is he capable to regain this coherence? Well, by the grace of God, yes. But it hasn't happened yet. If we see it, then we will have to lay down our weapons and reunite with them. We will have, because then they will become the same position as the Archbishop Lefebvre, as the original stem, of Archbishop Lefebvre. If they return to that position and they behave accordingly, then there is no point for us to separate ourselves from them and to attack them. There is no point. We would be the bad guys because we would hinder the work of tradition. But they are using the new code, and they're the priest who published the book on the family, quoting Novus Ordo popes in his book, Father Troadec. It has not been published. He hasn't been rebuked. His book is currently published by Clovis, the publishing house in France, or the books of Father Cellier. Those are erroneous books. So as long as it is there, I mean, we can't reunite with them. Yes. Another question.
When you said in your sermon that Pope Pius XII wasn't free to appoint the bishops that he wanted, he had interference with the government, were you speaking of France or the whole world?
France, Germany, Netherlands, Spain, most of the concordates in Europe, even the concordates in Europe with the Catholic nations, but everywhere else, all the bishops are appointed by a terna, that is a list of 3 names or 10 names that are proposed by the government, whoever it may be. So the Masonic government proposes the list of bishops.
That was in the United States?
That was before the council. And so Pius XII had to choose in that thing. So probably the list would go back and forth, and then they would end up with a bishop who would be a very shallow one. And that's a bad situation. That's why what I observe the most in Bishop Fellay is who he appoints. Because it is in your district that Father Rostand called the faithful to pray with Pope Francis for peace, while Pope Francis was praying with the other religions. Now, in the past, when it was in the first Assisi, Archbishop Lefebvre exploded and condemned Assisi I. The second Assisi II, we condemned Assisi II. It was less an outcry, but it was there. And Assisi III, we were silent. And now this time, when the Pope prays with the other region, we join his prayer. We pray with him. I have that in my bag. Can you bring my bag, which is over there? I'll give you the paper. It's on ssps.org. If you, in the search, rectangle, you put Syria Vigil of Prayer, or Syria, September the 7th. And Father Rostand publishes the appeal of the Pope to the other religions. Father Rostand was my friend. But I must say that when he quotes Pope Francis, I invite each person, including our fellow Christians, that is the Protestants, followers of other religion, and all men of goodwill, that is the atheists. And then this is published on ssps.org. And the way Father Rostand starts, says, the Holy Father convokes a day of prayer and penance for peace in the Middle East, the call for peace is certainly a good one. So he says there's only one true religion and everything. But then, just like in April 15 declaration, he contradicts it by joining that appeal. Whereas in normal times in the society, we would have prayers of reparation. Because when you pray with the other religions for peace, you are calling for war on this world, in this world. There is no better way to call war, to make war descend in this world than this. And that's why if you look at the situation in Syria from the newspapers, it's getting worse. That is, the rebellion in Syria is bigger because the US are funneling, and the Qatar and Saudi Arabia are funneling weapons and Islamic militias in a country which was very tolerant of Christians in the past. And so Christianity is going to be wiped out from Syria. And it's getting worse this month. The rate of fighting is intensifying. And Israel now is bombing Syria. It's a mess. And then Russia is sending more, has just sent today or yesterday, an aircraft carrier and a cruiser in the Mediterranean. So the Russian fleet is building up in the Mediterranean. So the tempers are rising. Those prayers haven't worked at all. And the Muslims are still in Malouda, you know, that Christian village north of Damascus. And so there are massacres of Christians taking place today, after these prayers were made. So I leave these papers for you, because it's a fresh evidence that the liberalism is there. It's not that we have any antagonism, personal antagonism towards these people. It's nothing personal. But this is goofing up. This is wrong. Even I don't think the Equizade people go even that far. The remnant people. I don't think Michael Max called us to pray with Pope Francis on that occasion. I don't think so. So that liberalism is there. I'm sorry. I mean. And you see the liberalism that takes place locally here, and everywhere I go, there are manifestations of liberalism. So, and this is about the First Commandment, so that's quite serious. Now, in normal time, Father Rostand would have to be punished for doing such a thing. But we cannot reconcile on this condition. What else did I want to say? And then there is a new generation of priests that comes out of the seminary. They are pious. And they go to their priestly duties, yes. But they are missing this militant element. I was trained with Bishop Williamson. But when I was also in first year in Flavigny, but when I was in first year in Flavigny, Father de Jorna was around. And he trained us to be soldiers. They wanted us to be soldiers at that time. And even the Father André, during the Ars pilgrimage, on the microphone, talking to the seminarians, he said the priest must be an extreme man. Le prêtre doit être un homme extrême. And Father André has been sidelined. But he's a priest who told us that there is a holy anger, there is a holy hatred for what is wrong. It's in the Psalms of David. It's in the breviary we pray. And now, so a worrying thing that we also learned recently is that Father de Jorna, at the beginning of the general chapter, Father de Jorna intervened and he dismembered the April 15 declaration. His conclusion was, this April 15 declaration is the same thinking as Benedict 16th. It's the same. It's the same as the hermeneutic of continuity. That is, you can postulate tradition and reconcile tradition with Vatican II. You can put Vatican II in continuation with tradition. You can expose Vatican II as a continuation of Catholic tradition. It's called the hermeneutics of continuity. So, Father de Jornat demonstrated in front of the general chapter, was very brave to speak like that before his peers. And there was a big silence. But his intervention was killed in the bud. Because immediately after he had finished, Father Pagliarani stood and said, "We cannot slap our superior general in the face like that." And so they didn't ask him to retract his errors, to say that this text is wrong. So Bishop Fellay simply said, I withdraw the text because it's dividing us. So to this day, Bishop Fellay claims that this text is good. And so this has allowed error to spread, because they did not root out the source of error. Out of false loyalty to authority. True authority, when an authority makes mistakes, the best way to reinforce itself is to admit that a mistake was made. Heroically, like General Lee, after Gettysburg, he says, "It was my fault," and then the soldiers, "No, it wasn't your fault. The day was against us." But at least he makes the admission. Or Andrew Carnegie says, in a corporate world, when you are a boss, if you make a mistake, if you made one mistake, well, just convoke everybody and state it loud and clear that you have made a mistake. And you will see that the trust of your employees is going to be multiplied by 10. Because you will have much more their trust if they know that you don't take yourself as an infallible oracle of God. Because Bishop Fellay is not the Pope even. He is the superior of the pious union. Not a congregation, a pious union. That's what we are. So, and that could have reinforced his authority. I'm not asking him to step down. To step down is not the solution for him. But simply to admit he's made serious doctrinal errors. But that's tough.
Father?
Yes.
You were talking about that document that you had. Father de Jornat, he stands up, he deconstructs the April 15th.
Yes, yeah.
The district superiors in attendance were at the point of asking for the resignation, as I read it anyway, for the resignation of Bishop Fellay.
No, Bishop Fellay countermanded that because at the start of the chapter, he passed a vote by which they would not ask him to resign. Yeah.
Okay, but at least they were quite upset by this. And then this rector from Argentina, he stands up and says, "We can't slap our superior general."
Yeah.
So
behind him there is a whole liberal clique. Behind him there is Bishop Galarreta.
Right, but then he withdraws this April 15th,
Yes.
and out of that comes this silly 6 conditions.
Yes.
Now, how in the world does something like that emerge with these 3 sine qua non conditions, which are ridiculous on their face? I mean, particularly the third one about we must have one bishop. They don't even stipulate who is going to select that bishop. How in the world could they move from an April 15th declaration to something as ridiculous as the 6 conditions? I don't understand.
Well, because they have not removed the roots. So if you don't remove the roots, you're going to have more liberalism. That's the problem. They will now root out the virus.
And none of the district superiors would question, say, that third condition.
There was a minority of 9 capitulants who wanted Bishop Fellay to retract his errors at least, or step down. Those were 9 out of 40.
Well,
The 30 others are liberals,
yeah.
doctrinal liberals.
So they were willing to take the chance that with these 6 conditions, that the Vatican might indeed appoint a bishop for the society, which would not be a conservative or traditional bishop, but one of their own appointment, and they were willing to go along with that. I fail to understand how even the quote liberal priests could have gone along with that.
Well, they always say it's the church. They are the church. So it's a mush. Yeah. All right. So these are the updates I can give you. But the case of Father Lamorand is very telling, just like the case of Father de Jornat. Because we argue that you can resist from inside. No, the institution is there. The institution is bearing against the truth. That's the problem. And it's the same error as Vatican II 40 years ago. So, yeah.
Father, you know how you've been describing how serious liberalism is and how you need to root it out, right? At the very root. Well, we come across faithful who say, well, you know, we're all tainted with a little bit of liberalism. You know, that's just the way it is. It's okay. And they don't have the understanding that you can lose your soul if you're a liberal. And even a little bit of liberalism
Grows.
is not acceptable, and you have to root it out.
The problem is it's a virus. The virus is alive. It grows and multiplies. So, and Bishop Fellay had liberal ideas when he was a seminarian, but he worked on them, and then he became anti-liberal. They say that Pius IX was a liberal before he got elected Pope. Not to a great extent, but he had tendencies. But there has to be a work of uprooting. And it's painful. But if they are not fighting it, I mean, they're gonna go down the drain. And we see in some places the youth. I mean, they got 10 vocations this year for the U.S. district, but that's not good. That's not enough. We've got so many children now in the United States. How come there are so few? And the resistance has 7 out of a much smaller recruiting base, I would say. So that they should worry about this. Anyways. So, worldwide, so the resistance is 50 priests basically. So, you got 20 or so in the US. I was glad to hear that Father Perez there are 4 priests in LA with Father Perez. More or less the resistance in US and Canada is 20. In South America there are 15. In Asia with me we are 7. There is 1 now in Africa, Father Dong, that's his name. He's the first African to join the resistance. And there is some in Europe, of course. 10-ish, 10 or 15. So that adds up to 50 or so. So it's still quite small. But we have a bishop. We have opened our seminaries. And we have youth families who are, bringing us the souls with the desire of the priesthood. So I hope I'm not missing my plane. What time is it?
20 of 11.
20 of 11? Okay, well, still good. Yeah. Okay, so I give you my blessing and be on my way. Benedictio Deum Omnipotentis, Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti, descendat super vos, et maniat semper. Amen.
Thank you, Father.
Thank you.